Hello, my lonely trollops. I am coming to you because we've been especially lonely in the month of July. Pretend this long August weekend is a part of July. Because Steve, our fearful, fateful, fearless leader, has had taken the month off to do some reading of Boswell's The Life of Johnson, which I totally recommend you go over to Mayberry Books, where he's been leading people through kind of a reading of Boswell's Life of Johnson, a book that I read a while ago. It took me 2 years to read, so I wasn't going to try and reread it in a month. But yes, instead, I decided that I would just sort of take the off month, not to take a break from Trollope, but to try some Trollope short stories, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today. It's a collection called An Editor's Tale. So reading from the TrollopeSociety.org, which is actually quite a good little compendium of Trollopian facts and lists of characters and things like that. They say, sensitive and generous to new talent, as Thackeray had been generous to him, he Trollope tried to help several young writers and poets when he became, in 1867, the first editor of a new literary magazine, the St. Paul's. Modesty made him oppose the owner's suggestion that it should be called Trollope's Monthly, but he resigned after less than 3 years in the job. I was too anxious to be good, he explained, and did not think of what might be lucrative. So yeah, he was an editor for a very short amount of time, but he did actually produce a collection of stories during that time, most of them published in the St. Paul's magazine, called An Editor's Tales. And they form this little interesting little collection of very late Trollope. Trollope was born in 1815 and died in 1882. So this is like the kind of the nearing the kind of the end of his career, where he produced these stories, which are all told from the point of view of an unnamed editor. We'll go through them because they kind of have some themes going there. So there's 6 stories in this collection. I was definitely taking it easy on myself for July. There's 6 stories. Yes, the Turkish bath, where this man braces the editor at a Turkish bath, where everyone's in towels and stuff like that. So he's like, he seems like a quite learned guy, and he says, I want to give you some of my writing and stuff like that. And he's like, okay, editor's like, sure, fine, whatever, I'll try, because he seems like quite a charming guy. He turns out to be actually, when he puts the clothes back on, turns out to be kind of rather shabby, but charming. And the editor kind of humors him, but his work is very odd, and through kind of tracings of kind of visiting him at his home and stuff like that, he actually finds out that the man is kind of got mental problems, is mad, and so he doesn't publish him, but he finds that he, along with actually a lot of other writing houses, provide him with his pen and paper and stuff like that. So it's like the editor's like, well, I didn't get anything out of him, but he was a very charming fellow. The next story, Mary Greasley, there's a charming girl, but she doesn't have any literary talents, but the editor finds her charming. Kind of, she's engaged to an invalid curate. He tries to teach her to write, but with very small success. And the dying curate, elicits a promise from her not to actually do any more of this, this writing thing. It's not a thing that a respectable woman should be doing. And so she gives that up. The curate dies, but she remarries, becomes a missionary, and dies herself in some foreign country. In the next story, Josephine de Montmorency, the editor receives these letters, very kind of high, kind of like very proud letters that intrigues, saying like, I want to give you the chance to have my works. But it turns out that actually the works aren't particularly that good. But he's intrigued because he spies on what he thinks is the author, and he's like, it's this very good looking woman. but actually that turns out to be the actual author's sister-in-law, and she turns out to be a kind of a very sickly invalid woman, under the name whose actual name is Marianne Puffle. So it's kind of very kind of and she it's interesting. It's one of these stories where she spouts a lot of very kind of philosophical nonsense within her stories, which is just like, could you kind of chop this out? I almost wonder if it's a little reference to George Eliot or something like that. But he does actually end up nursing one piece out of her, but not really to his own profit. He definitely makes the point that you get the kind of the whole thing of the editor's trade in this. It's like, it's much better if like a beginning writer starts off with like a really crappy piece that the editor can work with them and kind of teach them the trade a bit. That way, when they get to a large work, they can produce large works that are actually usable, because when it becomes to a big one, it's not, it's not, it's not going to do its thing. Um, in the next story, the Panjadrum, got part one hope and part two despair, and part one is, the editor is getting together with these bunch of these people to put up a magazine, but with this one and the next one and the despair, there's so many kind of internal strifes. Very comedically, nobody is interested in the editor's fiction. They certainly don't want a novel from him. This is apparently before the novel was serialized. Novels were the de rigueur thing in magazines that would like speed the things. No one wants that stuff. Everyone's got their own little hobby horses of stuff that they want, but they refuse utterly to actually even listen to any of the editor's fiction, which you can see this is very personal experience from Trollope. And in the end, they only have one editorial meeting where everything just explodes, and it's dead. It's dead in the water. It's dead in the water. So it's very much kind of the inside world of magazine editing, which it feels really like what like a magazine, or probably today actually more like a website would be today, where unless you have one strong voice of the person who's like in control, you have multiple voices, which just ends up with a sludge, which even if it does get published, it's just pulling in all different directions and things like that for the most part. Next story is The Spotted Dog, where again, the editor gets this strange letter from this guy saying, well, you're probably not going to want to help me. You're not going to be interested in me at all, but I'm this scholarly man. I was at the great, one of the great colleges. It's the blank college or whatever, is how it gets put in the story. But he's a fallen scholarly man, Julius Mackenzie, and now he's reduced to churning out stuff for the Penny Dreadfuls, which comedically, the editor has there's such that divide at this point between high and low literature, I guess, that the editor's like, oh, I wasn't aware that there were the Penny Dreadfuls that are churning out all this content for the lower classes. So the editor makes the efforts like, I'll hook him up with this country clergyman who's got been laboring over this work of learning for like years and years and years. But the professional people who are supposed to make an index for it failed terribly. It's just a complete mess. So she's like, maybe I can get that job to Mackenzie here. But Mackenzie is like, he's not sure about Mackenzie. And the thing with Mackenzie is his only kind of character references are the Penny Dreadful guy and the keeper of the inn. That is basically, it's kind of like it's an inn, it's a pub. It's basically, I'm using my bartender as my reference. It's like, but I don't drink anymore. And he's got a big red, Julius Mackenzie has a big red nose. But through careful interviews, they actually do give him the work. They do give him the work where there is only one copy of it. And they say, oh, well, you can work at the inn. And indeed, a part of the reason why the editor seems to actually want to do this is because the innkeeper has a very pretty wife, I think it's Mrs. Grimes, who's young and pretty, and he's like, oh, I wouldn't mind, having more interactions with her. That's as far as the kind of the lechery goes, that little undercurrent of lechery goes there. But, it's like, she actually says, oh, well, he can work in our bedroom during these fixed times, because that way he can't work at home because his wife is a complete drunkard, just mad woman, not mad, but just mad with drink woman. So they set this up. He starts getting money, but unfortunately, that means that money funnels back to his wife, who is a lowborn wife. I should mention, Julius Mackenzie said, "Oh, I decided to marry down in the world because I wanted to escape the banality of kind of middle class Victorian life, but it's doomed him to this alcoholic wife and his own alcoholism and degradation." And indeed, in the part two, the result, everything goes to disaster. The wife ends up getting her hands on the manuscript and burning it. And the scholar Mackenzie, in the end, is like, I guess that's the last straw, and he commits terrible suicide. He commits suicide, and that's the end of that story. Kind of a really sad story. And in the sixth and final story, Mrs. Brumby, a horrible, ugly old woman, has turned to writing for income. Because, what is a woman going to do in this world of what thing can she set herself to? And she's like, oh, this is a way to get money. She bullies the editor. She just barges in, bullies the editor, forces him to take her manuscript. When he doesn't read it, she's kind of storms back in, and it's like, and it gets more and more kind of heated until the editor's assistant kind of lightly touches her on the arm to, like, you can leave the office now, ma'am. At which point she turns around and just boxes the poor editor's assistant's ears, which results in a lawsuit by the woman saying, I was assaulted. And in the end, the editor's publisher has to pay her to go away, and the editor himself is forced to write an apology for the alleged assault by his assistant. So yeah, those are the 6 stories of an editor's tale. There's definitely, it was an interesting thing of just like, okay, this is obviously Trollope's exposure to kind of the editing side of things, and that his editor character is so kind of hapless, and there's no this editor never publishes anything. never in any of these stories is he actually shown publishing anything successfully. You kind of see that interscene kind of world of like trying to put a magazine together, and all the jousting, and like, where are we going to get the money from? Who's the money guy? Actually, to get the money guy isn't the problem. It's more all the competing ideas of what a magazine's going to be like. The idea of, like, a lot of these writers' lives is just not happy. You have the alcoholics, the alcoholics or the madmen. There is definitely a thread through these stories of the woman writer, the female who's like, oh, I'm going to turn to writing because that's basically in this kind of fairly restricted society, if I'm slightly an upper class woman, like, what can I turn my hand to make money? Which reminds me of Trollope novels that we've read in the past, where females have turned their talents to writing, and oftentimes they don't really have the talent. It's kind of an interesting comment on Trollope here, that, I mean, they're all stories of frustration, but that there is that good kind of Mary Greasley, Josephine de Montmoreau, Miss Brumby are all about females who can't write, and that the editor has to deal with in various ways, whether they are charming like Mary Greasley, or just horrible kind of bullies like Miss Brumby at the end, but that he's not giving them. There's definitely, it seems like the implication in these stories is that women shouldn't be in the writing profession. You kind of get that sense. I do wonder if Josephine de Montmorency, who turns out to be Marianne Puffle, is sort of a little bit of a satire on someone like George Eliot, who is undeniably a great writer. But you wonder if that's if that philosophical bit there kind of annoys someone like Trollope, who definitely lightly peppers stuff like that maybe through his work, but is not interested in great swaths. I'm not that much of a George Eliot. I haven't read enough George Eliot to actually kind of comment on that for sure, but that was kind of an interesting thing of you start, after you get like kind of a pattern of stories that you think, and pattern of stories, and also, damn it, I can't even remember the book now that we just read, the where the I'll probably put it here, where the she's producing these histories that aren't that good, but she wines and dines the editors and charms them to kind of get her books pumped up or published and stuff like that. So it's definitely a certain level of sexism in Trollope. So yeah, that is The Editor's Tale by Anthony Trollope. It was an interesting thing to see him in kind of the short story form. I do enjoy him more when he gets to stretch out novels. This didn't have a lot of the kind of the upper high class stuff that we've seen in his other novels. This is definitely kind of working more down in the kind of the humble area where actually I guess Trollope is actually operating. It's interesting that this isn't his usual subject, is his own kind of, what I would think maybe might be his own class. So yeah, it's interesting that way. All right, I will stop there because I've gone on. Yeah, and I guess if anyone knows what Steve's doing next, I have not figured out if he is what Lonely Trollope is doing next. If he's doing the Lonely Trollope, or if the hiatus will continue. Of course, he might show up on August the 8th with, "Hi, this is a Trollope we're doing. Has everyone read the appropriate pages for this week?" He's probably dropped it into one of his many videos, and I'm a failure as a Trollopite, not a Trollopite, as a Steveite, as a Donahueian, that I have not watched all his videos and carefully combed them for announcements of the Lonely Trollope Trollopathon. More videos later.